that song really hit home with me. Not that I was a terrible child, but I think I began to realize the impact of the Scriptures in my life. I began to understand what Jesus had really done for me when he went to Calvary. Mercy there was great, and grace was free, and new life was mine forever. The Beatitudes are a call to live life intentionally, knowing what God has done. We are called to follow Jesus and begin to live life with a purpose. But the truth is, most of us live life as if what we do really doesn't matter. We think that we are insignificant. We think that the difference we make is not that great. And so we often live life in the moment. We simply go with the flow and let life happen. Oh, we try to live right and to do good whenever we can. But there isn't a great sense that anything we do will have lasting significance. But Jesus calls us to live with intentionality. Because Jesus knows that the things we do today may make a world of difference. That was the point of last week's message. When we talked about hungering and thirsting for righteousness, we noted the fact that Jesus calls each of us to look for ways to make things right in the world. He calls us to reach out to our neighbor with compassion and to find a way to bless them, especially when the world has gone against them. This week we're going to take that a step further. We're going to talk about mercy, which is another word for forgiveness. You see, mercy is the gift that we offer when we do not demand what we deserve. Let me say that again. Mercy is the gift that we offer when we do not demand what we deserve. It's kind of the opposite of fairness. The problem with this scenario is, as we said last week, there is something deep within us that always seems to call for justice. Our parable this week is a perfect example. The first thought that comes to many of us when we hear this parable in Matthew 18 is outrage. We hear how that first servant mistreated the second, and we want something done. How can the man who had been forgiven so much turn around and go out and demand something that he had just received grace from another? When the king throws that unmerciful servant in jail, now admit it, we want to stand up and applaud because justice has been served. That man deserved that punishment. And you notice what it says in that passage. It says, and that first servant was tortured. Now, even if you're against torture, when we read that in the Scriptures, we say he got what he deserved because he did a despicable thing. Wanting to see justice done is a part of the fabric of our being. Whether we're talking about what's happening over at Dartmouth, we're talking about what's happening in some inner city in the United States. There is right and there is wrong. I know one of my favorite books as a teenager was The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas Père. I don't know what that Père stands for. I know it means father, but it's always listed after his name. Well, that's another day. But in this story, a young man is unfairly convicted of a crime and he goes to jail. He spends time in jail, and then through a number of circumstances, he's able to escape and find a fortune. And he becomes the Count of Monte Cristo. And then very, very poignantly, he goes back and he gets revenge on those who put him in prison. Now that story has been played out over and over again in books and movies in the last century and a half. And we love to see vengeance served and people get what they deserve. But here's the problem. We are not at Bar Dante. Vengeance is not ours to serve. Jesus calls us on several occasions to leave the vengeance to God. The truth is, though, some of us don't like that. When we're wrong, we want to take things in our own hands. And that's become so important. I heard a story about a man who loved dogs. And he even set up an animal rescue league, and he had dogs brought into his home, and he kept the dogs there, and he took care of them and watched over them until he could find homes for them. And he began to study dogs, and he began to know all the different species and varieties of dogs, and knew all their peculiarities, and he became such knowledgeable in the field that people began to invite him to come and speak to them, and the different dog societies would have him there. Well, just so happened that this one day he decided that he was going to redo the sidewalk in front of his house. And so he went out there, he had the concrete poured, and he had just finished kind of laying it all out. And walked away, and all of a sudden the dog came up and walked right through the cement. So he shooed the dog away, and he was a little aggravated, and he went back, he got his trowel, and he laid it all out again. And he went in the house, and he said, I've got to put up a fence around. He went out to the back of his shed, came up with a little fence, and there was the dog again, tromping through the cement. And he was just flustered. And so he chased the dog away and with a few choice words, and the dog ran, and he put the fence up, and no sooner had he done that, he turned around, and the dog was back, and the dog went right into the middle of the cement, and he sat down. And this great dog lover went in the house, and he got his gun, and he shot him. The neighbors were incensed. They said, well, you were this man who all of our life we've heard these stories about how much you love dogs. Why did you do that? And the man thought for a minute and said, I do love dogs, but that's in the abstract. I just hate dogs in the concrete. I know, it's poor. When it comes home to our religious faith, the point is that it's great to talk about things in the abstract, but we live in a concrete world. You see, the point of the story that Matthew tells isn't that justice needs to be served. You see, God will see to that. The point of the story, though, is that mercy needs to be a part of our life now because there is a new reality. It's not just something we can talk about. Oh, Jesus saved me. Oh, at Calvary, wonderful things happened. Now that story of Calvary has to embed itself in our life and become concrete part of the fabric of all we say and all we do. And you see this story in Matthew 18 points to the new reality of life in the post-Christ world that we are a part of. And in our text today, Jesus calls us. He invites us to live in this new reality. As a matter of fact, he actually tells us in the Sermon on the Mount that when we begin to live in this new reality, we will be blessed. That's the essence of the fifth beatitude, which we're exploring today, where he says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall be receiving of mercy. To be Christ-like is to be merciful. Psalm 145 verse 8 says, God is kind and merciful. God is slow to anger, full of unfailing love. You see, God was in Christ. So Jesus says if you really want to be happy and blessed in this life and receive all of God's blessings, you need to be people of mercy. People quick and always ready to forgive. So let's get concrete for a moment. Who are we to be merciful with? You know, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount actually talks to the leaders there, and one of